This presentation covers the back third of the ALTA NSPS land title survey specifications known as Table A. The main body of the ALTA NSPS specs are detailed instructions for land surveyors in how to prepare ALTA surveys. Within themselves, they are a complete body of work adequate for ensuring the title of most any property. Table A is a menu of additional items that can be selected and added to the scope of the survey by the client. And there seems to be a varying level of understanding of what Table A items are and why they are needed. Some, such as item 6, are required for a zoning endorsement, for an ALTA zoning endorsement to the policy. There are other aspects or other parts of Table A that coincide with other endorsements and specialty insurance coverage. But for the most part, they are for the taste or the preference of the client as to wanting them or not. So what we're going to do is look at the uh, Table A. And this is the ninth page of the ALTA specifications. And let's look at here the introduction to it says, note whether any of the 19 items of Table A are to be selected, and the exact wording and fee for any selected item may be negotiated between the surveyor and the client. Any additional items negotiated between the surveyor and the client, in other words, that are not included in 1 through 19, must be identified as 20A, 20B, etc. Any additional items negotiated between the surveyor and client, and any negotiated changes to the wording of a Table A item must be explained pursuant to Section 6D2G. Notwithstanding Table A items 5 and 11, if an engineering design survey is desired as part of the ALTA survey, such services should be negotiated under Table A item 20. So then it just goes right in to adding the Table A item. So let's look at that last sentence for a minute. If it's an engineering design survey, so we're basically going to look at it in two different ways. An ALTA survey is either being used for a title transaction, which is a purchase, a acquisition, a financing, refinancing, restructuring, etc., such that the primary focus is to look at the title elements, the boundary survey, and the easements of the property. It's a very similar product to create a survey to that level of detail and then add into it those things which are required for an engineering design survey. In other words, it's not being used or not only being used by a title examiner or a lender or purchasers or lenders counsel, but also to be used to engineer and design improvements to the property, such as to build a certain building on the property or to do an addition or to demolish and replace. So when a survey is being used for engineering design purposes, it takes on some different characters and some different approaches than just if it's from a land title approach. Now, it's certainly possible and is even common to use the same surveyor and the same survey for both. Often, though, the engineering design survey strips out the survey or the ALTA elements. The easements would still be depicted, but all of the various notations, the exceptions, all of the different things that make an ALTA survey unique are not applicable at all to an engineering design survey. Yet, Table A attempts to open the door to allow people to include various components of an engineering survey into an ALTA survey by simply adding them on. And sometimes it's very adequate. Sometimes it might be a little bit clumsy. I'm going to switch over now to a document that I prepared here in my firm that has been used in continuing legal education presentations and so some other informal presentations that I call a buyer's guide, because in the world of ALTA surveys, from the client side, not the surveying side, there's a lot of you know lack of understanding or misunderstanding. Often, if you go back to the first section of the ALTA survey, or actually I guess it's section 2, about ordering the survey, when someone contacts the surveyor and says, I need an ALTA survey of this property. Well, we're supposed to kind of ask, what do you need it for? What are you doing? What can we do to help you? And one of those things that we basically have to ask is, what, if any, table A items are you requiring? Sometimes it's a person in a law firm that's not familiar with it, so they just go asking, what table A items do we require? What table A items do we require? And often they'll pull out a list that they have no idea where it came from. They don't understand the reasoning or rationale behind these table A items. And so they create additional expense and time sometimes that doesn't benefit them at all, simply because they don't understand. It's not, it's all in good faith. It's not, none of it is nefarious or intended to harm anybody or to elevate anybody's costs. But everything that is added to a survey scope adds some time and it adds some money. So you want to stress by saying that these are these are optional items. The ALTA survey standards as they stand are sufficient to ensure title. There may be some odd instances, like I said, with the endorsements where they need a little additional, but table A items are optional. There's nothing that's going to be, there's no penalty if you do not require any table A items. So this guide is intended to be a guide for insurers and lenders and clients when considering which, if any, items on table A are to be included in their survey requirements. ALTA survey standards are in place to provide a common denominator across all 50 states and the territories and possessions due to how widely varying the standards are between each state. Each table A item, again, adds some additional time and cost to the survey. So we're going to come down and look at, let's look at the purpose and the types of the surveys. And we'll just simply call them ALTA surveys instead of repeating ALTA NSPS land title surveys. That's what we're meaning. So we might be surveying a fee simple developed commercial property. This is the most common, in my experience, type of property that an ALTA survey is required for. Usually required when the dollar amount being insured or borrowed elevates above a certain level. It used to be a few $100,000 in some banks, in some scenarios. It may be $1 million. It may be more than that. This is where below that threshold, just a very simple survey that simply meets the state standards would be applicable. And above that dollar amount, the lenders are wanting, or the title insurance company is saying it needs to meet the ALTA standards for a survey, not just your local state requirements. But this is what we're typically seeing is it's an office building, a restaurant, a store, or something, and it's already developed. There's a building sitting there, and very seldom will any table A items really apply to that survey, at least what's needed. And yet, particularly item 5 and item 11 are typically not going to be applicable or helpful in that. Sometimes it's fee simple raw land or developed land that is to be developed. In these cases, an engineering survey may be part of it. So then items 5 and 11 and topography, which is vertical relief, they're going to be part of that survey. Then you've got raw land tracts. Often there is no requirement for a specific survey to be met when acquiring or insuring a raw land tract. Usually they'll want at least a boundary survey that meets the state standards. But sometimes, depending on the lending, depending on the usage, sometimes people just want to be extra sure and extra careful and elevate things to the next level. And so an ALTA survey will be required for that. And then D, we have what I call special applications like oil well easements, sign easements, lease parcels. So those are already kind of raising people's eyebrows as to how do we insure this? How do we loan against this? So a lot of times that thought process goes ahead and brings in the ALTA surveys to be considered as the correct survey for that. So now we're going to get right to it. Item one. Monuments placed or reference monuments or witnesses to the corners at all major corners of the boundary of the surveyed property unless already marked or referenced by existing monuments or witnesses in close proximity to the corner. So what this basically means is set missing property corners. Now, in Georgia and most all the southeastern states, setting missing corners is required almost, but not 100% of the time, always. But some states don't specifically require monumented corners. And monumenting corners, it's always recommended, it's always good survey practice. So if you're in a southeastern state, especially Georgia, you're not going to be required to check number one. It's already required by the state standards. There are states that if you're, it's not only is it not required, so therefore it's an additional service, and the ALTA standards themselves do not require setting missing corners, which is an odd situation where the ALTA standards are below the state standards. But the reasoning for that is there are some states, a lot of western states, particularly California, that by law to set a missing property corner is a lengthy and detailed bureaucratic process. The survey work, the plats and calculations have to be prepared and submitted to the county surveyor's or engineer's office, where they review it just like a set of plans. And then they get back and either say, we agree with you, you can set the pin now. Or we don't think you calculated that right. We think you should take this other section corner into account, go locate it, resubmit your calculations, and we'll review it again. And then after they get the position for the new corner approved, then after they set it, they have to provide a detailed report to the county office on where the pin went, exactly how far it is from the back of the curb or the edge of the road, utility poles, culverts, and things, so that that position can be found more easily, even though surveyors typically are able to find that. So that's why number one is optional and not included as a requirement across all 50 states and the possessions. Number two, the addresses of the surveyed property, if disclosed in documents provided or obtained by the surveyor or obtained or observed while doing the field work. So there's obviously some benefit in saying that, yes, this is the right property. We've conducted our research. We've surveyed to the point of beginning or point of commencement, and this is definitely it. But the non-surveying, non-title side of the world doesn't deal in legal descriptions. They deal in street addresses. So if there's, if the property is supposed to be at 123 Maple Street, and we find out that it's at 127 Maple Street, there may be a problem. There may be utility counts, tax accounts, there may be all kinds of things that are crossed up. So, and that's very seldom the case, but to add the address to the survey helps make everyone feel more comfortable, and it dots some I's and crosses some T's. Number three, this is not a requirement in any state that I'm aware of or work in, but a flood zone classification or a flood statement. This used to be very commonplace, and almost everybody that required a survey required a flood statement to be on it, but no more. It's pretty much optional across the board. And this is requiring the surveyor to gather information from FEMA, to do some graphic overlays, some measurements, sometimes even to determine a mean sea level or other reference datum elevation on the property, and then incorporate flood hazard data from FEMA or the state surveying office or state floodplain office, like North Carolina and a lot of counties have very detailed flood information that's beyond what's available from the FEMA website. And obviously, that's lending requirements. The FDIC rules of practice require lenders to get a flood cert, which is a determination of special flood hazard area. And these are prepared by firms that simply look at maps and street addresses and make an educated guess from looking at a map as to you're in or you're out. Seems a little whimsical or imprecise, and it is, but that's the lending requirement as it stands. So they don't really need the surveyor to do that. So that's why it's optional. But sometimes if they want that, maybe it's just to again to have a redundancy, to have an independent check on that, or if it is in a flood hazard area or part of the property is, the ALTA survey would then incorporate that data and to see, maybe part of the property is, but the building is not. Maybe the building is, maybe the whole property is, and then you look at the base flood elevation, and we have to, in that case, might need to or have to determine and report the base flood elevation of the structure or the at the structure, and then the elevation of the structure. So again, 1, 2, and 3 are not really helping a whole lot on title elements. Let's kind of keep that in mind. As if the ALTA survey is required for a real estate transaction of some kind, we're not seeing anything in the table A items that really are necessary for the evaluation of a title exam and title insurance policy. So let's look at 4 and 5. So 4 is just gross land area. And this is mainly applicable in states that have little or vague surveying standards, where it might actually be okay to issue a survey without putting the acreage on it. Another use of the table 4 is to quantify other areas if specified by the client, and that's right there in section 4. So they might say, let's not only the gross area of the property but also let's look at specifying some other areas like the net area. By the time you take out easements and encumbrances, how much of the property is unencumbered? Or perhaps if we're back to item 3, how much of the land is above the base flood elevation and outside of the flood hazard area? So that's mainly an item that has no title implications, hardly ever that I could think of, but would be applicable if the client is looking to know that for any particular reason. Maybe it's tied into the appraisal or a contract that if there's not at least 12 acres above the flood hazard area, then they will adjust the price. One interesting other areas specified that I have ran into, particularly in North Georgia and Tennessee, where the natural topography is very steep, and it's been graded, is they want to know the flat area. In other words, they don't really care how much land is there. If it's in stream buffers and cut slopes and fill slopes, they just want to know how much of it's flat, because that's what they can develop. So there might be 8.7 acres of gross area, but we may delineate 2.63 acres of flat area. So those are some examples. Again, that doesn't tie back to anything in the title exam, but usually, if there's something in the written record or in the contract, then maybe there is. Number 5 is vertical relief with a source of information, as in ground survey, aerial map, provide the contour interval, the datum with the originating benchmark when appropriate. So this is saying add elevations and or topography, whatever is applicable. If it's a very flat piece of property, Florida, some of the very flat parts of the Midwest and so forth, there may be no contour lines. The property may be virtually flat. So in lieu of that, you would provide spot elevations or just vertical data. So vertical relief is just synonymous with topography, basically, and number five. Um, so this is very common for an engineering survey where they're going to be doing design work and studying the drainage and all, but uh, with very rare exception, is there any connection with the vertical relief and the title or lendability of a piece of property? Perhaps if there's an easement or an air rights or something, or subsurface rights that are tied to particular elevations, number five might be applicable to such situations as that, but only that in the title realm. So now we're going to look at item six. So there's not just item six, it's either 6A or 6B. They're very related. So this is what I call the zoning item, because this is what it pertains to. So listen to how it's worded, because it used to be worded differently years ago, and it's worded particularly for to accomplish certain set of goals. So it starts off kind of an odd sentence structure. If the current zoning classification, setback requirements, height and floor space area restrictions, parking requirements specific to the surveyed property are set forth in a zoning report or letter provided to the surveyor by the client or the client's representative, list these above items on the plat and identify the date and source of the report or letter. So let's unpack that just a little bit. It's basically saying show zoning classification, setback requirements, floor space requirements, parking requirements, but only if they are provided to the surveyor in a zoning report. And that's just to create a box or an area on the plat and regurgitate that information and then cite the source. So, planning and zoning report, PZR, is a acronym that's also specific to a particular provider, but that's one thing I call it. Is, let's just say 6A is chosen and we get that report. We just look at the report and we say per PZR report number 1234, dated January 1st, 2024, such property is zoned light industrial L2. Setbacks required are blah blah blah. Height and floor space are blah blah blah. Parking is, 2 spaces per 150 square feet of office space or whatever. And we're just regurgitating that information onto the plat if 6A is chosen and if the zoning information is provided to the surveyor. So now let's look at 6B, which is basically the exact same requirement, except it also adds graphically depict those. So basically setback requirements, any particular buffers or oddities that are within the zoning report, graphically show that on the plat. Don't just provide the text on the plat, but graphically show those. Most particularly, that's going to be a building setback line. But it's caveated with if those requirements do not require interpretation by the surveyor. A lot of properties is somewhat ambiguous. What's really oddly shaped piece of property? Where is the side setback? Where is the rear setback? So they're taking, ALTA took this out of the hands of the surveyors to investigate and interpret. So, that the zoning report will need to say, and I've seen it such as the rear setback should apply to the 270.84-foot line that lies on the northeast side of the property. They're taking the interpretation out of it, so that the surveyor can simply show, so that basically the surveyor has no liability or responsibility for item six. We surveyors are simply regurgitating and depicting that information on the plat for you so that it's all in one place. In one way of looking at it, 6A and 6B is not really required, because if you've got the zoning report, you can look at it and see for yourself. A couple of things that's worth elaborating on this. Why is it like this? Well, before item 6 was reworded like it is. I cite back to a particular instance where I was surveying a commercial piece of property in a North Metro Atlanta county, which was a convenience store. And it required for me to show the setbacks. Well, we went to the county's website and planning department. It's zoned at whatever, zoned blah. We look up the ordinance and the rear setback is this, the side setback is this. So we drew the setbacks on there, and the store is encroaching in the setback 4 feet. And so the wheels came off the bus. Everybody was alarmed. Oh my gosh, they could make us tear the store down. The county might put fines on us. We might eventually get shut down, put out of business. Closing was postponed. The emergency brake was hit, and the train slides to a stop, and everybody's disheveled and unhappy. And so then the buyer wants to walk away. I didn't ask for all these problems. I'm out. The seller gets really irate, and he accuses me of having it wrong. I understand where he's coming from. I didn't take it personal. And so even though we were working for the buyer, the seller winds up on the phone with me, and I'm just wrong. There's no way that's right. And I said, I'm sorry. That's all I know to do. And so, make a long story short, when the store was built, the zoning ordinance was different, and the side setback was 10 feet instead of 15, which they later raised it to. The building was 11 feet from the property line. It was 1 foot in the clear when it was built. Now it's 4 feet over the new standards. But the county issued a letter that said, when this store was built, the setback was 10 feet. There is no violation. I changed the plat, referenced the letter. The closing went on, although it was delayed 2 or 3 weeks while they sorted it out. Almost an identical situation, also in Cobb County. I did basically the same thing, and dang, we've got a setback violation. It was not quite as big. It was 2 or 3 feet. It was an old building that had been added onto, and yeah, wheels came off the bus. Everybody's tore up and excited. And what happened there is they found out that there had been a variance issued when the little plaza was added on to, when the dry cleaners needed to add a few extra feet over on this end for whatever purpose, and the city gave them a variance to the setback requirement. But if you just look at the tax parcel and then you just look at the ordinance, those things are not there. So this is requiring a detailed, site-specific investigation and report be made by someone who specializes in that, and then provided to the surveyor. So that eliminates those type of train wrecks like I was involved with. Another thing that's worth pointing out is some people want to go low budget, quick or cheap, and they will do themselves and just get a zoning letter from the planning and zoning department. And usually all that's going to say is property zoned M1. Yeah, side setbacks are in table 62-138 of the city code. We have no outstanding violations with this property. It doesn't tell you a whole lot. That's part of what a zoning report does, is they get that same info from the city or county. And they'll also research and look into variances and when structures were built, what versions of the ordinance were in place at the time of the construction and all that, which you don't get from a zoning letter from the zoning department of that city. You have to dig deeper. So in summary, 6A requires the surveyor to reflect the zoning information on the face of the survey. 6B requires us to do that, and the depiction of the setbacks. Now, look at item 7. 7A, exterior dimensions of all the buildings at ground level. B, the square footage of 1, exterior footprint of all buildings at ground level, or 2, other areas as specified by the client. Maybe they want to know how big a concrete pad or a parking lot or a dumpster pad is, but they can request us as surveyors, as expert measurers, to determine the square footage of just about anything that's specified. And C, the measured height of all buildings above grade at a location specified by the client. Now that's very odd. I've never had a client tell me where to specify it. If no location is specified, the point of the measurement shall be identified. So again, these have no implications to the title to the property, but there may be reasons for it. I've asked title examiners, why are you asking for 7A and 7B1? And they can never give an answer because there is no nexus to the title considerations of a piece of property. Uh, Perhaps they need it to, because I literally had a client this week ask for it. And I said, if you don't mind me asking why, and the response, this was by email, was, well, I'm purchasing the property and I'm planning to uh, divide it up into suites. And rather than measure it myself, I'm just going to get you to. Okay, that's a fair enough answer. Has no, this was not the attorney. This was the buyer himself. Uh, there's no title connection, but sometimes these things they want to know. I think sometimes they want to compare, maybe if this is supposed to be a 10,000 square foot building, and that's what the appraiser measured or the tax assessor's office is measured. They want the surveyor, the expert measurer in the equation, the one who's working for them and responsible for measurements and calculations, to tell them, oh, it's really 9986. Well, that's close enough. Thank you. Probably what they're more looking for is, you mean it's only 7,800 square feet? What's going on? And so there might be transactional purposes to some of these table A items that have nothing to do with the title. Measure building height, that's going to basically tie into section 6 on the zoning. There probably is a maximum building height requirement in the zoning, and so item 6 means we're regurgitating this information, telling you what the requirements are. If it says maximum building height in this zoning class is 40 feet, and then we report and show the height of this building is 38 feet, then they can say, okay, we're in compliance. Probably checks the box in giving that zoning endorsement because they know there's not a building height violation. Uh, so this is not difficult, but it does add time and expense. Some government agencies require 7A and or 7B, such as like HUD on multifamily. The exact purpose and benefit is not really evident to me. Um, and due to thicknesses of veneers, duct chases, chimneys, and the dimensions by a survey will rarely match those of an architect or that of heated space. There might be some very small, minute differences because of that. Item 8, I often kind of wonder about because I can't imagine not surveying parking lots, billboards, and signs in the course of doing an ALTA survey. If you reflect back on the actual standards, we're supposed to show everything like this at least within 5 feet of the property line. So there are options to where maybe the client is not interested in spending a lot of money on the detail of the improvements in the middle of the property, and so it's not directly required. We can always make a note that improvements exist that are not shown. If it's the buildings have to be shown. So notice that buildings are not located in the examples. Buildings have to be shown anyway, but this is specifically expanding the location requirement to include parking lots, billboards, etc. Now, since we already also by the standards have to show anything within 5 feet, this is not going to produce any new aha moments for any encroachments. But this is obviously interesting to lenders, and so and buyers, they might want to see all of it. An example when this might not apply was given in a seminar that I attended years ago, where it was a large, like 1,000-acre piece of property, and right in the middle of it was an explosives factory, and they had all kinds of utility features and structures and things inside that fenced area that was high security. It was right in the middle of this large piece of land because it had to be so many hundreds or thousands of feet from the nearest property line. And so they knew where it was, they knew what it was, they didn't care that it, the distance to the property line. Maybe they needed to know that it was at least 1,000 feet or something, but they just did not take the buildings and all the different things that had to be located inside that area. They removed that requirement and did not require item 8. So again, item 8 is usually basically included as a matter of practice, at least in our area. There are instances when it might not be located, might not be required or included, but number 9 is the number and type of parking spaces that are clearly identifiable on the surface, on parking areas, parking lots, and parking structures. Yes, we've had to do this in parking decks where there's 5 or 6 levels of parking, and we just provide an extra sheet for each level of parking if they want to see it graphically depicted, or we can just list it because it's a little bit. It doesn't really say that we have to show the number and type. We just have to provide it. So the most common purpose of this is either, there's supposed to be 842 parking spaces with this mall or this plaza or this office complex, and they need to make sure that there are. The more likely connection is that they're looking for a zoning endorsement on a property like that almost every time, and they're looking to make sure that they don't have a violation with the parking. They might also kind of cross-reference that to how much parking do we have? How much parking might we need? If we're looking to add a building, do we already have enough parking, or we're going to have to build more? That sort of thing. Number 10 is often checked and very, very seldom has actual application, which is, I'll read it, as designated by the client, the determination of the relationship and location of certain division or party walls with respect to adjoining properties. Now, this would be maybe in a new condo style development or a strip plaza with multiple tenants where each suite is owned in fee simple and the property line is a party wall. Party doesn't mean get down and boogie. It means there are two parties that come together at that wall, and the wall is in fact the division between the two parties. Usually it's the middle of the wall. Sometimes it's a mathematical location that is intended to be very near the middle of the wall. If it's a fast food restaurant on an acre lot, as you can see, there is no item 10 connection. But yet many lenders say, oh, item 10, got to have item 10. But we as a survey have to come back and say, okay, which party or division wall are you designating us to go locate? And usually we don't even get an answer. Or, the metaphor is we get a dumb stare. What division wall? Well, I don't know. You asked for us to go locate a division wall. What division wall do you want us to go locate? So, if item 10 is chosen, the client must designate which party walls are to be located. Now, I have saw it one time where, there was this plaza in Buckhead in Atlanta, and there was, a pet store, a bookstore, a nail salon next to a grocery store, and they wanted to see where those party walls were and who was in each suite. Now, may have had something to do with leases, may have had something to do with some representations made to the lender. I don't know, but that was a rare instance of where it actually made some sense. But they didn't require it in detail or any calculations. They just wanted us to divide it up on the plat like it was on the property. Now, item 11 is one of the more misused, misunderstood items in all of Table A and all of ALTA surveying lore. Let's talk about this for a minute. Before the 2011 standards, the survey standards did not require surveyors to show evidence of utilities. The title people involved said, we really need that on every survey because that may indicate easements and things that are not found in the record and may not even be evident on the ground. There could be underground utilities there that the only way that anybody has to know that they're there is a sign, a post, a pedestal. So those things do have title implications, obviously. And so we are required, without any Table A item, to show evidence of underground utilities that are observed in the course of doing the survey, and that's in section 5E4. So the only time item 11 needs to be selected is when a higher level of utility investigation needs to be incorporated into the survey. So you can't just say item 11 anymore. You have to say 11A or 11B. So when item 11 is chosen out, A or B, there has to be a utility report, utility plans, a private utility locate that is given to or provided by or obtained by the surveyor, and then we have to use that to go out and correlate all of these plans and reports and the markings on the ground, locate all that and reflect it on the survey. That's usually part of an engineering survey. There's rarely any title connection to an existing property. There's rarely any benefit in having that provided on a commercial property ALTA survey. But still, because some people are, several years out of date, I guess, uh, actually it was 2011 still had it. 2016 is when it was changed. So 11A means, hey, I'm the client, Mr. Surveyor. I'm going to provide you with utilities plans and reports, and I want you to incorporate this into my survey. And you need to provide those to the surveyor when you're requesting the survey so that the surveyor can look at it and determine how much additional cost it's going to take. That's rare that a client, especially a lender or somebody, is going to have a bunch of utility information on a commercial piece of property. Maybe on an industrial site where they've added things, they've kept, they've got a maintenance foreman that's kept track of all these things, but that's rare. 11B means we need to go hire a third-party utility company, a utility consultant to come in and do an investigation, call all the utility providers, get what information is available from them, then go out, do their magic with ground penetrating radar, with their electromagnetic sensors, and paint and stick flag sticks all over the property wherever they detect and think that there are utilities. So that adds a few $1,000s of utility locate expense and then additional survey cost. Again, if that's important to know, then that's what you need to do. But if you're refinancing an office building, there's rarely any benefit in doing this. And the bold print here is in the ALTA standards. It says, note to the client, insurer, and lender. Information from these sources will be combined with the observed evidence of the utilities in 5E4 to develop a view of the underground utilities. However, lacking excavation, the exact location of these underground features cannot be accurately, completely, and reliably depicted. Now, I also want to stress this. In some jurisdictions, and now most jurisdictions, the 811 or the call before you dig lines, they will they're often ignored or they result in an incomplete response. In other words, if we call for that, surveyor's request is put on the bottom of the priority. If they run out of time that day, it don't get done. And sometimes it's not one utility person that comes out. They call for the water department, the power company, the cable company, the phone company, the gas company to all come out and locate theirs. And some of them just don't. Some do. So if you come out and okay, the 24 hours or the 48 hours is up, everybody's done their job, and you've got a gas line located and a power line located, and that's all. There's a good chance that they just didn't get around to locating the water line or the cable TV line or the fiber optic cable line, and so it's incomplete. The free locates are a net negative, and they're not even allowed really to be used because 11A, client provides all the data. 11B, the surveyor gets a private utility locate. There is no way to really incorporate the 811. You can, because these ALTA standards are all contractual and can be modified, but I don't do it because there's too great of a chance of it being incomplete. I've also, in other states found that the free services, they'll only locate the utilities from the main, the trunk that's out in the road right of way, up to the property line, up to the right of way line. It might be 20 feet. And they're basically just saying, at this point, a gas line comes into your property. They won't do it. They won't locate on private property, just on street right of ways. So uh, that's just an example of why you don't want the call before you dig line. So some of this might have some connection, as we said, to the title implications of a survey, but most of that's already covered by depicting the observed utility evidence without having to get it located. Item 12, as specified by the client, government agency survey related requirements such as HUD surveys, surveys for the BLM, offer leases. The relevant survey requirements are to be provided. So this is pretty self-explanatory. Uh, certain certain properties and certain rare instances have unique requirements to them, and that's just saying if you check number 12, the client has to provide these unique requirements, and that they become part of the survey engagement and contract. Number 13, names of adjoining owners according to the current tax records. So in some states, it's not required to list this. ALTA standards require that we obtain the descriptions and information of all the adjacent owners for our boundary analysis and to ensure that there are no gores or overlaps or that such are depicted. So it's already a requirement, in most states, Georgia and most states that I practice in, it's already required. So 13 is not necessary. 14, the distance to the nearest street. This can vary widely. There's already a requirement to have a valid point of reference to incorporate the point of commencement of the record legal into the survey. Some areas this might be helpful for proximity, just to know where it is, but everybody involved in the deal is probably going to know where the property is. This is kind of rare for anybody to actually select 14 now, but I can see it being of particular importance. Particularly in some of the western states, there are a lot of subdivisions that are done on paper only. There are no streets, and it's just property that's you know you can only find it by surveying it. Literally, there are a lot of areas in the Midwest that are like this, and so that might help to nail down exactly which piece of property it is, and to make sure that the surveyor is surveying the property that the parties think that they're using. Item 15 is relatively new to the scene. It's if this is checked, rectified orthophotography, photogrammetric mapping, remote sensing, airborne or mobile laser scanning, and other similar products, tools, or technologies as the basis for showing the location of certain features excluding boundaries where ground measurements are not otherwise necessary to locate those features to an appropriate and acceptable survey accuracy relative to the boundary. So the surveyor must discuss the ramifications, such as the precision and completeness, with the insurer and the client prior to the performance of the survey, and then place a note on the survey explaining the source, date, precision, otherwise. So say there's some improvements on the property that are not that important, but they need to be shown. They want to know where they are. And the surveyor says, I can use aerial photography and get it within 5 feet. And if everybody's okay with it, you'd use that. Also means that you might use drone photography or aerial photography, or there may be some of laser scanning and that sort of thing might be used. And this is really a gray area because a lot of this now, drone capture data is quality controlled and integrated right into the ground survey in most situations. So it's not really item 15. It's just another tool in the surveyor's toolbox. I believe this is more applicable to when we're using somebody else's data or using aerial photography from Google Earth or something, because the client just wants to know approximately where that cleared area is, or maybe that old storage building on the back side of the property. I can't really imagine why we would incorporate that on anything in the southeast. Maybe some huge tract out west. Uh, it might make a lot of sense to take some of that from aerial photography rather than survey out there on a huge tract of land just to locate one building. When you can see it, and if it's not close to the boundary, there's usually no harm. So 15 has its place. I will say more likely it had its place when a lot of this technology was first coming out of the ground. I believe this first showed up uh, in the 2011 standards, maybe the 2016s. So they've been around for a few years already. And one reason for pointing some of the, indicating the source and some of the risk is this did come along to where there was a piece of property that was used in an example in a seminar. And right after the aerial photography was captured, there was a fire. Some of the buildings in the compound burnt, and so those were reflected on the survey. But they had to note that they were accurate as of 2008. The survey was done in 2009. There has been fire damage, so yeah, that might be an instance in how to address some of that in item 15. Item 16, this is often used when when it's involving new construction or might be involving new construction, and the insurer is concerned about lien exposure. So it simply says, the box is checked. We are to show evidence of recent earth moving work, building construction, or building additions observed in the process of conducting the field work. So I will say recent is a relevant term. Was that 3 or 4 years ago or 3 or 4 days ago? Was it ongoing? Uh, so I think if somebody says item 16, uh, it's so relevant and subjective that if it's under construction, there's a bulldozer out there, or if there's straw where they're trying to get recently graded grass area for grass to grow, it might be a situation that we might have something to report. Uh, when in doubt, always go back to whoever's asking for item 16, saying, what are you looking for here? What are you concerned about? What is recent to you? And sometimes we just can't tell because we weren't there 3 years ago. We can't tell if this is new or not. Item 17, getting close to the end. Proposed changes in street right-of-way lines if such information is made available to the surveyor by the controlling jurisdiction. Evidence of recent street or sidewalk construction or repairs observed in the process of conducting the field work. So 16 is involving improvements on the property. 17 is regarding improvements next to the property. And so my thinking is that this is, if we're aware of some change coming to the property, then we need to show it. I guess if there is a set of plans being circulated where they're going to widen the property and take 10 or 15 feet of the subject property, we should identify that. Now, there's usually not a clearinghouse that's in a consistent place in each county or state to find out about that. And some projects, I know of one project that was on the books and on the official map of the county put out by DOT of a proposed highway that connected two towns through a remote area. And it first appeared on DOT maps in the 1970s. And then in 2021, they actually finally built the first stage of that highway. And the last stage is set to be built in like 2028. So, this is very subjective. It may mean more in some parts of the county or some parts of the country where maybe there's a common source to go look. We just don't really have that in the southeast. So, recent street repairs might mean that there might be some some creep of prescriptive limits. I don't know. Item 18, pursuant to sections 5 and 6 and applicable Table A standards, excluding item 1, Include as part of the survey any plottable off-site appurtenant easements disclosed in documents provided to or obtained by the surveyor. So obviously off-site easements that benefit the property can be important. For example, if the property discharges its stormwater to a community detention pond, then the property is only compliant with zoning laws and environmental laws if that detention pond is benefiting the subject property. Uh, might be a force main for a sewer or a sewer line that comes from a public street across somebody else's property to provide sewer to the property. If the title insurer is so concerned about this that they want us to resurvey those easements, then that's what we do. Uh, doesn't necessarily change anything, but if there's some ambiguities or some issues or some clouds, I have actually had this happen where they selected item 18 and it was about a sewer line, and we determined that the sewer line actually crossed one property that they had not gotten an easement from. And it was because the property lines were boogered up and the engineering company did not do a good job of determining where the property lines were. So I can see some benefit there, but as a general rule, always selecting 18 is just going to increase a lot of expense that may or may not have any benefit to the property outcome. One example that we had down below Atlanta was this was checked, and it was an out parcel at a Walmart, Home Depot, or Walmart and Lowe's plaza, about 60 acres, and there was interconnecting parking and vehicular traffic, reciprocal easements. There were 3 detention ponds. There was a sewer lift station, a sewer main, and we had to say basically, if you want us to basically locate and survey every plottable offsite easement that benefits this property, we're going to have to resurvey the whole shopping center, 60 acres. And your cost is going to go up, like by 6 figures almost. And it's going to take us an extra month or two to complete this. And of course, they looked at us like we were crazy. But when we explained it, they said, oh, well, don't do that. I said, well, just take item 18 off of your menu. And they did. So we just took 18 off and finished the survey in normal fashion. 19 is professional liability insurance policy by the amount specified. Usually they specify $1 million. Sometimes they'll specify $2 million. It's been clarified in the 2021 standards to say that the policy information is not to be required. I have had people say, paste a copy of your declaration, your insurance declaration policy to the plat, or provide us with the carrier name, phone number, and policy number. And a lot of people had heartburn about that. I was never crazy about it, but it's been clarified to say the certificate of insurance is to be furnished upon request, but this item shall not be addressed on the face of the plat or map. So, basically, when someone specifies this, they rarely ask for, I say rarely, less than half the time, probably around 20 or 30% of the time, do they say, hey, we need a certificate of insurance. It needs to list us as an additional insured. And you can get with your insurance carrier and provide that. Otherwise, we just check that item 11 is there. As a matter of fact, the dollar amount is in the table A item with the survey order. It's a contractual item between the client and the surveyor. I don't list the dollar amount on the plat. I just list item 19 as one of the table A items that are included in the ALTA certification. And then item 20 is left blank for a reason. It's anything else that's not covered in 1 through 19 that needs to be added. Some examples that might be added would be latitude and longitude of the property, like GPS coordinates. Sometimes, an additional service might be to place postage signs along the property, or to put additional stakes or steel posts or PVC or fiberglass posts along the property line. perhaps providing an original out of Mylar paper, recording the survey. Nothing in the ALTA standards or the Table A items require recording the survey. I have had some commercial lenders who want their surveys recorded in the public records, which I think is a great idea. And there's no reason not to in Georgia unless you're breaking the subdivision ordinance in your county. If it's a retracement or an approved division or modification of property lines, the certification that we're required to put on there anyway entitles it to be recorded as a retracement survey. But the system is set up to give flexibility between the clients and surveyors to tailor an arrangement that accomplishes the client's needs. So we've covered all 20 items. I hope you found this useful. So if you're on the legal or lending side, please think about these things before you specify Table A items. If you are a current or future land surveyor or student who is learning about ALTA NSPS land title surveys, then I hope these give you some insight in how to deal with the request for these various Table A items when they come along. And hope you found this useful. Thank you very much.